usual, but really excited to bring this presentation to you today because we, number one, in light of the importance of agriculture in our counties and our program, some of the key users of technology heading off on their farms are farmers and people in the ag industry. And it's great to highlight how important these technologies are in rural communities for the economic impact. You know, agriculture is one of the real global competitive industries out there that I saw recently about shifts from now in Brazil being a hugely dominant exporter of markets, places where we used to have kind of 100% control, and you just see how these technologies, once available in one part of the world, certainly don't stay there where they're created. They spread rapidly to other places, and important that we're always on that cutting edge of agricultural productivity. Today, we've got three great speakers, I think, going to provide some great information for you. We have Reagan Tibbs, and he's with the Illinois Extension Service and has done some fascinating direct research with producers, and he's going to report on that. We have Bailey Edenberg from the Illinois Farm Bureau, who's going to talk about the work that they've done in her county to really, and this is down the path a little bit, but how do we really get smooth broadband implementations in rural counties in Illinois? And then we also have Ashton Bailey, although I have not seen her yet, is a speaker with Evergreen Field Services and is really someone who applies that technology in partnership with farmers every day. So exciting to have this special session on agriculture, and we're going to jump right off and start with Reagan Tibbs. Welcome, Reagan. We met you just a few weeks ago when our cohort that's previous, when we came to Illinois to visit this cohort of communities. Kathy had you on the agenda. Kathy Brown from Greater Peoria had you on the agenda as a featured speaker to share what was going on in their county. So welcome, Reagan. Tell us about your research.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, can everybody see my screen and can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yep. All right, wonderful, awesome. So like Bill said, my name is Reagan Tibbs, and I am a commercial ag educator for University of Illinois Extension. I serve, Logan, Menard, and Sangamon County, so right kind of here in the heart of Illinois. As Bill kind of alluded to, I did a lot of work for my research, my thesis project at Illinois State University, focusing on precision agriculture technologies and farmer willingness to adopt these technologies to conduct experiments on their operations and work with researchers, extension personnel, you name it, to do these sort of experiments on their operations. So I'm glad to be here, glad to provide kind of an overview of where we're at in precision agriculture here in the United States, and kind of what my research found, focusing a little bit on the sort of overall adoption and sort of how internet access kind of plays into precision agriculture adoption. So I want to start with kind of a definition, an overarching view of what is precision agriculture. You can read there the definition from the International Society of Precision Agriculture. They recently revised that in just this past January. Essentially what it boils down to, though, is that precision agriculture is just one of the ways and one of the tools that farmers have available to them to help manage their operations in a more efficient way. Precision agriculture and the related technologies, or PATs, precision agriculture technologies, have really revolutionized the agriculture industry, and they have fundamentally, in my view and in the view of a lot of researchers, changed the way that we produce the world's food, fuel, and fiber. And when we talk about precision agriculture, We're talking about a whole suite of technologies, a whole different lot of group technologies. And I get to that in just a minute. But PATs and precision agriculture in general does offer many benefits, not just to producers, but also to the environment and to the value added chain. So when we look at producers, we can look at it from twofold. From an economic sort of standpoint, precision ag technologies can allow a farmer to more effectively, more efficiently utilize their inputs, whether that be seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, you name it. It can reduce overlap, or what they can do is they can spot apply these inputs and only in areas that specifically need it, or just the rate of the application, depending on the area of the field that they are in. And that also carries with it some environmental benefits, right? If we are reducing or being more efficient with our usage of certain these fertilizers, pesticides, you name it, that provides a lot of benefits to the local environment and to the environment downstream. I know here in Illinois and a lot of other states in the Midwest, we talk a lot about the nutrient loss reduction strategy in terms of trying to reduce the amount of nitrate, nitrogen, and phosphorus that comes from many different sources, but one of those being agriculture, from our fields down into our waterways, into our streams, down the river, down the Mississippi River, into the Gulf of Mexico. And so these technologies can really help reduce some of those impacts and hopefully bring us to a place where we can still utilize these inputs, but in a more environmentally friendly and efficient way. And generally speaking, there are two different types of precision ag technologies that are usually out there. We have embodied knowledge and information intensive technology. So embodied knowledge technologies are ones that don't necessarily require a lot of specific skills or abilities to utilize these technologies. And generally they're generally easy to set up and easy to utilize on pretty much any sort of technology and by most any type of farmer. So when we talk about these technologies, we're looking at a light bar or a guidance or a GPS auto steer system, things that have been around for a long time, don't require a lot of specific skills or a lot of specific technologies to use and can be utilized on practically any piece of technology or equipment. But information intensive technologies, on the other hand, just kind of as the name suggests, they provide a lot of data, a lot of information that not only the farmer has to go through and interpret it, but they also can be very complicated to set up and very complicated to run. Some farmers sometimes have to make that choice, whether or not you want to adopt this information intensive technology, or do you go for the embodied knowledge technology? Most often or not, when we look at the academic literature on this, the embodied knowledge technologies are adopted much sooner than the information intensive technologies. An example of those would be precision soil sampling, but also variable rate technology as well. So looking at adoption rates, kind of from a big overview of the United States, there's a lot of different factors that can influence the adoption. And the academic research on precision ag adoption goes back essentially from the first technologies that were introduced, the first GPS auto steer systems that were introduced. Researchers began looking at the factors that not only influence adoption, but also how the adoption of these technologies benefits their farm. So the study I have listed at the top is a meta-analysis. And for what that means is they look at hundreds of pieces of academic literature and condense it down into what is the main focus of them and what can we take as some of the most important factors that influence adoption. So in this study, among some of the other things they list, farmers' level of education, their farm size, their access to consultants and experts to learn these technologies, and their familiarity with computers. All of those have a positive or some kind of influence on a farmer's decision to adopt PATs. With education, generally what we see is that farmers who have higher levels of education, so those that have a college degree or higher, or college education, or higher, tend to adopt these technologies more. With farm size, our larger farms will adopt them a lot sooner, and adopt them at higher rates than our smaller farms. And then access to consultants or experts and the familiar with computers simply helps in that adoption process. If a farmer has access to resources to learn these technologies, but also has familiarity with how to utilize computers, utilize these technologies, that also has an influence on their decision to adopt these technologies and when they adopt these technologies. There's actually a recent study in the Journal of Precision Agriculture that looked at internet access and PAT. I thought it was really appropriate for this conversation. And so what they found is that 34% of their respondents were somewhat or very unsatisfied with the internet service provider at their home, farm, or business. Now that changes. So some respondents were really satisfied with their service provider at their home or at their business. But if they changed to say their farm, that's when they started to see a lot of unsatisfaction by the respondents, in that when they have really good internet at home or really good internet at their place of work, but when they go back to the farm, the internet's not as good. Most of these respondents, the participants in this survey, were members of commodity group boards. So think about the Corn Growers Association, U.S. Soybean Association, things of that nature. So these respondents really rely on this reliable internet for Zoom meetings, but they also use it for marketing and sales activities. So when they're trying to market their grain, and then also too for harvesting, utilizing these technologies with their combine and their yield monitors, but also with other technologies to keep them in the loop on what's going on during harvest time. And I really liked the quote that I see here: "I could not farm the way I do today without an internet connection." I think that really drives home the point of how important internet is for a lot of producers across the United States, here in Illinois as well. And they also did find that there were some limitations to adopting and utilizing these technologies. Mainly so were a unreliable internet infrastructure and financial barriers. Not necessarily these technologies are expensive, but the internet to utilize these technologies, that often was more expensive as well. And just simply put it, that cost was simply prohibitive for these farmers to utilize these technologies with their internet. So just kind of wrapping up on this, this is a really interesting study from the USDA, published in 2023. It gives sort of an overarching view on the nature and sort of the status of adoption of these technologies across the United States. I won't go through in every detail, but they focus a lot on digital agriculture. So we can look at some analytics tools. When you utilize those sort of tools, combined with some site-specific technologies, so say your soil maps and soil tests, that is where conventional, then you combine those together and utilize them with your traditional precision ag technology. So say your variable rate technologies, for example, utilizing those together can give you a better sort of picture or a better utilization of these technologies on your operations. And there are the three different types of digital ag technologies that you see there. So we have data collection. So for example, that would be a yield monitor or precision soil sampling. We have decision support systems, so that'd be a yield map, and then data-driven technology. So your variable rate technology, your section control, and your guidance systems as well. But overall, we see that corn and soybean acres tend to have the highest amount of adoption of these technologies across the United States. Not necessarily a surprise, particularly here in the Midwest. Yield maps, of course, are pretty widely adopted on these operations. Again, too, then we see that corn and soybean acres, about 37% of corn, about 25% of soybean acres utilize VRT for fertilizer, seed, or pesticide applications. I think that's going to continue to increase in the coming years, not just because these technologies become more advanced and become more easy to adopt and become more available, but also too, if we're concerned about our environmental impact in agriculture, this could be one way that farmers can really reduce their environmental impact when it comes down to it. And then, of course, guidance systems, they've been around the longest, and they have the highest rates of adoption across practically all the row crops from the United States. Not just corn and soybeans, but winter wheat, sorghum, cotton, rice, peanuts, you name it. A lot of those technologies have very high rates of adoption. Another interesting piece from this article was that these technologies are often adopted in combination with a couple. They're adopted in groups rather than just simply being adopted alone. So when we look at corn acres, about 23% of those acres utilize the combination of yield maps, VRT, and guidance. When we look at soybean acres, about 15% of them use yield maps and guidance together. But when you look at sort of individual technologies on their own, the adoption rates tend to be kind of pretty low in terms of I only use this technology on my operation, whereas I use a couple or three of these technologies. So kind of transitioning to my thesis research, again, I focused on farmer adoption of these technologies and willingness to conduct conduct experiments on their operations. It was part of a USDA NRCS grant that had a lot of collaborators from across the United States, including us at Illinois State, then of course the University of Illinois, University of Connecticut, Montana State, a whole laundry list of institutions across the United States that were involved in this research. And it was part of the project was called Data Intensive Farm Management. It's still going on over here at the ULI, but it is still being worked on with a bunch of different other collaborators across the United States. And so we conducted a survey during the winter of 2022 to 2023, mainly of farmers here in Illinois, primarily in Logan and McLean counties. So again, right here in the heart of Illinois. But we also had some responses from other parts of Illinois and then Missouri and Ohio as well, just to get kind of a broader overview and a more general view of where we were at. But these results we can really say for certainty here with Central Illinois. So we look at the adoption of precision ag technologies amongst our respondents. We saw that all those technologies you have on the screen have an adoption rate higher than 50%. The only ones that did not have an adoption rate higher than 50%, I believe, was only drones and UAVs. That was the only one that did not have an adoption rate above 50%. But everything else, again, we're seeing higher rates of adoption than what the USDA is reporting. But then again, this is a very localized study, so there is that difference. And about 63% of our respondents have been utilizing these technologies between 5 and 15 years. So not necessarily a lot of experience, but it's important to note too that a lot of our respondents had about 30 years or more of farming experience. So all our respondents have been farming for a long time. They haven't really been utilizing these technologies for that long, which is interesting considering that a lot of these technologies, particularly auto steer, yield monitors, etc., have been around for quite some time within agriculture. And then we also asked respondents about some of their barriers to PAT adoption. Of course, the one that was most commonly cited by our respondents was cost at about 89%. But the interesting thing too is about 34% of our respondents said a lack of reliable internet. That was their main barrier to PAT adoption. And then we asked the question later on, and I still don't understand how we got this result when we have, but I'll just say it and then maybe somebody else can have a little nugget of information for me. So we have 34% of our respondents say that they have a lack of reliable internet as a barrier to PAT adoption. But then we turn around and ask them, do you have reliable internet on your operation? 75% of our respondents said, yeah, our internet's reliable enough to utilize precision ag technologies. That has still bothered me to this day. We did our data analysis last summer, and I still cannot figure out the answer to that one. I still scratch my head with that one. But nevertheless, that's kind of where we found our study, and it was one of the first of its kind. We looked at farmer willingness to conduct experiments on their operations, but I won't bore you with 45 minutes of my thesis research. So those are the references of some of the studies that I mentioned. I'm more than happy to provide those in the chat or through an email to Bill or Reed. So again, I'm more than happy to answer any questions. I can't stay for too much longer. I have to run up to Bloomington for another meeting, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions and kind of provide kind of a general overview of where we're at with precision ag technologies. So thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Reagan, I'm wondering if what the other barriers besides the lack of internet were to the adoption of these technologies.
Yeah, so upwards of 88% of our respondents said cost of some of these technologies was a barrier. So that one, and that lines up pretty consistent with a lot of other academic studies on this. But in addition, we also saw that time was another barrier as well. The time it takes to buy the technology, get it in on the farm, and then learn how to use it. That was also a pretty big barrier. I don't remember off the top of my head how many people or how many respondents said that was a barrier, but I know that was the second largest barrier that we had was the time needed to learn technology, and then followed by a lack of reliable internet.
Okay, that's interesting. The reliability, you could, if you're in the farmhouse doing your work, if you have a glitch in your internet connection, it might not be a big barrier. If you're out in the field, uh, and it glitches, then does the tractor stop? Does the activity need to stop until the internet connection's restored? And it might also, it could be that I know a lot of the technology out in the field requires a cellular or now satellite connection, and they may be using a landline in their house, which is unreliable, but the cellular is still okay. So you can, or vice versa, even. So you could see where the different connectivity options would impact their ability to implement different technologies on the farm. So
Yeah, yeah. Quickly to that, some of the farmers that we interviewed and some of the respondents we had, what we found was that, when they're out in the field, of course, there usually isn't reliable internet because they're in the middle of a field, in the middle of the country. That's when they really rely on these cellular connections, and that's what a lot of these technologies do utilize as a cellular connection. But when they're in the middle of the country and there's no cell towers around and cell service is negligible and cell service is practically unusable or non-existent, then that does present some issues in terms of, if I'm trying to utilize variable rate technologies, if I'm trying to pull data in from, say, the John Deere Tech Ops Center, for example, if I'm trying to pull that data in, but I can't because I don't have any internet connection or cellular connection, that makes my job as the farmer and as the end user of that technology a lot more difficult.
and you always remember those days when it doesn't work, right? It has a big impact. Which of the PATs rely most on high-speed internet, reliable internet?
So I would say, looking at kind of where we're at, it's a very good question. The one that I would say does rely is if we're particularly in the future, if we're looking to a lot of remote sensors. So I've seen a lot of technologies where they have developed it looks like a little soil probe. It'll stick in the soil about 6 to 12 inches, and that can actively monitor soil temperature, moisture content, nutrient content. That does need some sort of connection to get back to whatever server is hosting that data or whatever server is holding that data, so that way then you as the farmer can go and access it, whether it be through whatever suite of technologies you want to utilize. I could do a whole other series on those sort of technologies, but I would say looking forward, and as those sort of technologies become more and more available, we haven't seen a lot of adoption of those remote sensors yet. They're used a lot for research, but I do think they could play a role in the future. So I think that definitely would be one technology, that would really rely on some reliable high-speed internet.
Good, thank you. And then there's a point Kathy Brown makes in the chat that a lot of times people don't really know what broadband they have, and that their lack of awareness of what a high quality connection can do is may hinder their willingness to jump in, and they may try something with a bad internet connection, which they think is okay until they try and use that technology. Then they find out it's really a barrier. Good. Well, Reagan, thanks so much for your research. I think that's really interesting. That's going on in Illinois and with Illinois farmers. And thanks for sharing your contact information. So I'm sure there's, as always, finding the right door to the university could be intimidating. So I'm glad folks on this team now have your contact info to reach into the university and see how they can help their farmers.
Yeah, absolutely. More than happy to help any way I can. And if you didn't catch my email there, I will send it out to Bill and Reed. They have it and they can distribute it out to everybody else. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak to everybody today. I really appreciate it.
Good. Thanks, Reagan. Next up, we've got some sorry, Bailey Edenburn. So we're trying to locate our other speakers. So we're a little challenge here this morning on my brain. But Bailey, welcome and thanks so much. We know you're hugely connected to a big effort in Champaign County to bring farmers onto the team to smooth the path for better broadband. So thanks for joining us. We're looking now at your preview slide as opposed to your other. So
how's that?
Perfect.
Perfect. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Bailey Edinburgh Conrady, and I am the manager here at the Champaign County Farm Bureau. So we do have the main campus of the U of I. Go Illini. I'm not wearing my orange and blue today, but I hope everyone will root on against Moorhead State at 2:10 on True TV. Not that I'm going to be sitting at Buffalo Wild Wings or anything during that game. But good morning. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing here in Champaign County, how the Farm Bureau is involved. And, you know, Regan talked about all this cool technology we have, and I'm going to talk about why it's really, really hard to get broadband into rural areas, thanks to landowners and farmers. So we're gonna kind of tackle this from a different path. If anyone has any questions, feel free, put them in the chat. I'll try and keep an eye on it. And we can go from there. Yeah, ILL is exactly right. So, everybody see my second slide?
We do.
So a little bit of background first. So Champaign County Farm Bureau, for those of you who don't know much about the Farm Bureau system, we're a grassroots agriculture organization. Champaign County has the largest farmer membership in the state of Illinois at about 2,500 farmer members. And we pride ourselves on really three pillars: information, education, and advocacy. And the broadband effort for the Champaign County Farm Bureau really started before broadband was cool. We were working on this pre-COVID. We had a board member actually was very frustrated that some areas of what we would consider in-town Champaign were getting grants to increase broadband service in those underserved, what we now know are underserved areas, and we couldn't get it in the rural area. So late 2019, early 2020, we were talking about this and how Farm Bureau could be involved. And then COVID hit. And as we all know, COVID further exacerbated, you know, it really showed that gap in the rural areas. And so coming out of COVID, we did a broadband survey before broadband surveys were cool. Surveyed all of our members. We utilized our contacts with school districts, taxing bodies, everything we could think of in rural areas to really get a good idea of, okay, where is this a problem in Champaign County? Is it really a problem in Champaign County in the rural areas? You know, and then what can we do about it? And we looked at a lot of things. And then the American Rescue Plan Act came about. And we were lucky enough to get in. Champaign County Farm Bureau got in front of the county board at their first meeting when they were discussing the ARPA funds and said, hey, we need rural broadband. Our president at the time spoke. We had a lot of members reach out to the county board members, submit public comment, and got this on the county's radar early on. Lots of meetings, lots of talking. They formed a broadband task force, and which my predecessor, the former manager, Brad Eukin, chaired at that time, and which I now chair. And they started with an initial $3 million investment out of the ARPA funds to do a full plan. They contracted with a third-party engineering firm to come up with a final report recommendation, and they went to the county government, county board, with an ask for an additional $7 million to be used as matching funds for the grant process. The county board approved that additional ask. And they also have continued, as other ARPA projects haven't used all their funds, they continue to put a little bit more money into this matching grant fund that they've created. And they selected two preferred providers, one of which was local, one of which is more of a multinational company, or a national company, I should say. to be kind of the county's preferred providers for the grants. We have submitted Connect Around 3 grants to the state and are waiting with our fingers and toes crossed to hear back on if or when we'll get this money. It's a 2-part project. The 2 companies have signed MOUs dividing the county up based on where some other grant money that these companies had been within census blocks. And so we're just waiting now very patiently to hopefully get the money. It's an $80 million project. The county's basically at 12 million now of matching funds. The companies are putting up their own money, and then we're hoping the state will give us the rest. So you may ask, okay, so why is the Farm Bureau involved? Which is a valid question with all of this. When you have providers that do this for a living, why are you still involved? You know, you got the money. Why didn't you just walk away? Well, A, we want to make sure it gets done. And B, we also, one of the red lines in the sand, one of the pillars Farm Bureau stands on is protecting our landowner and farmer rights. And so we have seen too many times we have seen fly-by-night broadband fiber installers, really any utility installers, come through, and especially in Champaign County, we have a lot of drainage tile, break drainage tile, or they don't get an easement, or they come through and you don't know where they laid it, and if you cut it, you're going to get in trouble as a farmer. And so we are working very hard in the background as we hopefully prepare for this money to come down, to work with these 2 preferred providers to create an easement that both protects landowner rights, but also allows us to get broadband to every rural household that doesn't currently have access. That is threading a needle. I've spent a lot of time looking at the plat book because, as I think all of us probably know, there's people who will never allow anyone to come across their property with anything or for any amount of money. And so as we're looking into final engineering, we are looking at how we can make this as easy and seamless as possible while still protecting landowner rights. The Farm Bureau, we've been here since 1912. We're well respected in Champaign County. Our name means something to our farmers. And so to protect our farmer members but get them also the broadband they need and want is the line we're walking. And so that's kind of been my life for the past month or 2, has been, you know, how do we make sure we get this right? So when the money does come down, I'm being very positive thinking there, we can basically be as shovel ready as possible. And we're very, very close to having an easement agreed to by both companies, which is a big win for us. But I mean, our complete end goal is fast, reliable, affordable broadband internet to every household in Champaign County. And so that's a huge goal. I think we can get there. It's just going to take some time and some cooperation. And we've done, it's a lot of collaboration across political lines, across public-private lines, and how we get this done and do it right and be an example of how you can put in fiber internet in the ground without making every farmer mad along the line is our end goal. So that's really all I had this morning. I wanted to keep it fairly short and sweet. Does anyone have any questions?
Haley, what are the kind of the things that are different in your easement agreement than what a telecom provider might hand off to a farmer in their first version?
Yeah, so a few things, several things, I should say. One is really it's 2 easements. We have a construction easement, and then we have an easement that is basically the fiber line is the easement, which basically allows that if they ever want to come back on the property, if they need to do something, they have to come back and talk to the landowner to get access back. Also, we have a somewhat extended time period for the discovery of damaged, especially drain tile. If we would get in a, if this year would decide to turn off and be 2011 or 2012, those tiles may not be running. So we may not know that there's an issue if they would cut one for 2 years, 3 years. And so extending that. And then the other big thing along with drainage tile is that the farmer can go find the person they want to repair the drainage tile. And it's not the telecom company picking the lowest bid to fix that tile as well. And so those are really kind of the three big things. There's a few other semantical stuff, but that's really it. I guess one thing I didn't mention is that we are working with the county government. I mean, we want these easements to all be filed too. You want them on file with the county. And so we're working with the county government to either lower or waive completely the filing fee for all these easements as well. So that helps on the dollars and cents side too.
What's your advice for broadband providers as they try and work with the farm community across the state of Illinois? Is the Farm Bureau the right place to go, or are you a aberration from your colleagues where you're putting in all this time to make it happen? Because certainly there's you're bringing your time and your reputation to this initiative.
There is, and I think Champaign County is a bit of an aberration in that we have quite a bit more staff here, so I can put the time in on this. But the Farm Bureau is certainly a place to start. The Farm Bureau, they have the connections in the rural countryside. They have board members who are from all parts of the county, and they are a good place to start. I do think that when you're going out and talking to farmers, you have to understand their viewpoint as well. You can't just say, well, I'm going to give you broadband, just let me come across. It's not that simple. As much as I think we all would love it to be that simple, it's not that simple in terms of, there are potential impacts of when and how you come across, their road ditch. And the worst thing telecom providers can do is to fly by night or say, hey, we're a mile down the road, we need you to sign this easement today. Absolute worst thing you can do. And so it's important that you're upfront, you're proactive with getting out there. And most farmers, if you can give them, hey, I've got a good plan for how we're going to do our best to avoid your drainage tile, but here's how we're going to protect you moving forward. We're going to do all these things that are going to avoid existing utilities. And we're going to get you faster internet to your house or to your barn or wherever. Most of them are going to be like, okay, this seems fair to everyone involved. And that's really the whole goal. One thing that I do think a lot of folks forget about or don't want to think about is the absentee landowner portion. There's quite a bit of ground. Champaign County has a ton of ground that's owned by people who don't live here. And that's a very different conversation than you have with people who live on the ground. And so getting those relationships with your local farmland managers, we've got Busey, Wallace, Atkins Group, we've got a good relationship with all of those to be able to access those absentee landowners first and foremost without having to chase into the ends of the earth. And also to be able to have them help us sell it. Because some of those absentee landowners will just see dollars and that's all they're going to be up for. And so having those farm ground managers help us sell that can be very helpful when it comes to working with those absentee landlords.
Can you, there's a question about private easements versus public right-of-way. It's my understanding that in a large amount of rural Illinois, that the private easements are required, that the right-of-way itself is a easement as opposed to a publicly owned piece of land. Am I on track there?
You are very much on track there. So in most rural areas, especially along township and county roads, the farmer owns to the middle of the road. I shouldn't say the farmer. The landowner owns to the middle of the road. And they have granted basically right away for the road, and that's it. Some telecom companies would like you to believe that if they get permission from the road commissioner or the county engineer, that they can go in those road ditches, and that is not true. And that is something we've had issues here with in Champaign County. I will tell you, we've had landowners call the sheriff to stop broadband projects from going through because they didn't have an easement and they thought they could just go ahead and go in. So avoiding those issues are some that, trying to be proactive to avoid that is important. And we're lucky both of the preferred providers we're working with have been very cognizant of that issue, at least so far, and have been very willing to have those discussions.
Okay, thanks. Any comments on poles, being able to attach fiber to poles in places where the poles exist, but does that require a separate easement as well?
So it depends on how the original easement was written when they put those poles in. Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. From a farmer standpoint, some of our biggest concern is that how low those wires will hang to have the proper distance from the bottom ground wire to ensure that we have access to farm fields with very, very large equipment. That is a concern for us from a farming business side of things. We already have issues with power lines that hang low enough that they're very, very close to hitting farm equipment. So if you're potentially hanging something along with that might be lower, that becomes an issue. There are some projects up in the northern part of the county that potentially one of the electrical co-ops is working with a provider to potentially do that. I don't know the status of that project myself. So it is out there, but there is discussion on, is that more feasible if you have to go in and put in taller poles to make sure everything can avoid very, very large combines, very, very large tillage equipment. So
yeah, and obviously every square foot,
everything.
Every square foot of ground is value if there's corn seed in it. So
they weren't wrong when they said farm fence row to fence row. So
good. Bailey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yep, and I'll put my contact info in the chat. Anyone, please feel free to reach out. Happy to point you in a direction if you're looking to get in touch with your local farm bureau, or if you just have some questions.
Good, thanks so much. Next, we're going to go to Scott Plato from Evergreen Field Services. Scott, I hope you're here. Welcome.
Yes, I'm here. This was a last second thing for me. Someone else is supposed to cover this, so I apologize if
I apologize for any confusion. So
that's not a problem.
Tell us about your business.
So we're a farm co-op in the FS system. If you're familiar with FS, we're a part of a regional federated cooperative, GEOMAP. Their GEOMAP. There's a very large footprint. If you're familiar with the cooperative itself, but it's made up of a lot of smaller or larger FS cooperatives across the Midwest and East and into Ontario and other parts of the country, southern states, so on and so forth. A very expansive cooperative. I have a slide deck, but I don't think I'm going to actually go into the slide deck. I've been listening to everybody's initiatives here and what pain points that they've been seeing and some of the challenges. And being a cooperative, there are lots of different things that we actually encounter in our services. So when we look at broadband and rural broadband, we look at it probably from a different perspective than anyone else. It's like, okay, we do have fiber. We do have fiber build outs to certain facilities, and that's been our focus. So instead of trying to get fiber to every house, to every in every community or every facility that we have, we kind of have taken the hybrid approach to things. So what we do is we have fiber into facilities that actually are conducive to air fiber. And it's something very similar to what companies like Serban will do. They will have fiber to a facility. And one of their examples would be fiber to the top of Watterson Towers at ISU. From there, they use air fiber, is the term I'll actually use, to beam it out to the rural location. So if you go from there out to Colfax or wherever else, that's how they service that community. So it goes in across the air to that community. It circumvents a lot of these problems that were just brought up as far as easements and poles and things of that nature. We bypass all the problems that could potentially be encountered between point A and point B. And then from there, in our case, we do air fiber between elevators, right? And when we get to elevators, if we need to, disseminate the broadband out from there, that's what we do. Does that help us with our facilities? And does it have potential to help some of our customers? Absolutely. It's using the infrastructure that we have to basically provide that service internally and externally. The other challenge that we have, and especially with on the equipment side, if anyone was in the presentation, it's probably like a year or two ago, I kind of discussed what we do as far as IoT, instruments in the field, things of that nature. Those are things that, it's kind of like that last mile type of architecture that, how do we get connected to those things? And more importantly, what services are available in the area to actually do that? Since we gave the last presentation and now, there's a lot of things that have happened, right? So we have, Starlink. So there's SpaceX, right? So you have major companies like John Deere, announcing strategic partnerships with SpaceX to provide rural connectivity. And, that is something that wasn't there a couple of years ago when we first started. This space has been exploding especially with the onset of SpaceX, with the availability that's actually out there for people. So what we're kind of doing is taking, more or less a kind of like a hybrid approach to it. We've got the fiber to facilities, we've got air fiber. We cover that. How do we work with the IoT that we have? There's a couple different things that we're doing there. There are some things that we're doing with Starlink. Starlink is a very good option. John Deere sees Starlink as a very good option for, satellite communications to implements. That is, where most growers actually need their broadband, is down at that level. They need good broadband. Starlink is a good option for that. The other thing that we have been leveraging is, site locations for things such as some of our IoT devices. And what I mean by site locations are, working with companies like American Tower to utilize some of their real estate to host IoT, which is relatively close to cellular service, right? So if you have IoT devices that are close to their facilities, they host cell towers. We have good cellular connectivity when it comes to those locations. So we have a large need, different types of needs for broadband. There's the old saying, necessity is the mother of invention, and it is. It's, we find it necessary to have things at the equipment level, at the field level, standalone at the field level, at facility level, and at, also at our customers, with some of the things that we actually provide them, with our AgTrinsic app. Our AgTrinsic app is an application that allows growers to actually see what we have, what applications have we done for them, all that stuff syncs up in there. They'll see their as applied. They see all these things. These things can be very broadband intensive, especially when you're talking about images. So having broadband at, at the, not just at the equipment for the customer, but at the customer's home or their shop, so that they can actually view these things. So we have a large, kind of like a very large need, and we have different solutions that we've actually been using for this. Is there one particular solution that is going to be a fit all for this? No, but it all starts with having, especially in the case of the fiber, having a plan in place to, where can we get fiber? Where does it make sense? Where is it going to be less, not so intrusive to the growers in the area? I know that was one of the things that was brought up in the last presentation. When we talk about easements and things like that, we don't want to be doing things and putting things to facilities that are going to, upset our customers, because we have to go through across their property or whatever else. So what other solutions are there? There was talk about poles, right? So if you think about a utility pole, and a few years ago, I had a MetroNet installed in my house. Well, the way that the property is in the subdivision, you can't bury fiber. So what they had to do is put it on poles. Now, if you ever look at a telephone pole, whether it's, and we call them telephone poles, but they're electric poles, whether it's like Corn Belt, say if it's Corn Belt pole that's out in the country, and if you pay close attention to that pole, you will see that the top part of the pole is where all the high voltage stuff is. So other utilities are reserved for, below a certain level. So all the electrical stuff is at the top. Low voltage utilities are further down the pole, and it's in that what they call the communication service range. So that, even though you've got it off the ground, you couldn't put it in the ground, you put it on the pole, you still run into some of those things that can be a problem when we talk about tillage equipment, augers, combines, whatever else. Is it going to encumber the movement in and out of a field? So we thought about all these things. It's like, we don't really want to do that. We don't want to run fiber over here to do that. If we can't bury it, we're not going to do it. But how can we utilize other technology and kind of like make a hybrid solution to this, so that we can actually get the level of internet that we need to facilities, and at the same time, not get in the way of any of the customers or the growers, fields, equipment, or anything else. So that's been kind of like our approach on it. And outside of that, I mean, there has been a great leap in efforts to get broadband to rural areas. Just through like satellite. Like I said earlier, a few years ago, we didn't have SpaceX. We didn't have, satellites being launched, it seems like once a month, 20 at a time. Maybe it's higher frequency than that. That just, that was, a few years ago, that was like, if anybody would have told me they would have had that capacity and they would have been able to do that, I would have said, no, yeah, that's fine. But it's nuts, but it's actually here. And it's gotten to the point where, the reliability is there with that. Is it, an actual physical, fiber wire to a house? No, but it's pretty good. It's pretty close. And, when it's going to be successful, and it's having an impact in the agriculture space, when companies start to integrate these things into what they're doing, whether you're CNH Industrial, whether you're John Deere, they're going out and they're creating these strategic partnerships, with these companies like SpaceX to service, farmers and to service their equipment. And you go out, you'll be going out this spring. You're going to see a lot of green equipment. And Deere's goal with that is to have an actual Starlink connection to that unit, and communicating with that unit in real time. That is where the industry is going with all of this. So there's a lot to think about. And I know that there's been a direction that a lot of people have been going, and a lot of research that people have been doing to kind of like facilitate fiber and things like that. But we have to be a little bit more focused on some of the other technology that's actually out there as well, and not forget about some of these other things that are available. And even like I said earlier, on a hybrid approach to fiber, physical fiber to a location, air fiber to those places that are hard to reach, air fiber to places that will navigate around or over some of the areas where we can potentially have problems with growers and easements and things like that, or poles and equipment, whatever else you want. So I think there's a lot of different options that we need to continue to explore and think about, and see, and pay attention to how the industry is moving as a whole when it comes to rural connectivity, especially rural connectivity to farmers and to communities. There's a lot of small communities that are getting, they're getting fiber. That's great. Some of them are getting physical fiber there. Some of them are getting, an air fiber approach to it. So there are different options. We can't really look at, a one size fits all. Think about doing a hybrid approach. That's what we've done. That's what we're doing now. And whether it's at the facilities or at the actual equipment level or in the field, that's what we're actually doing. And
good.
If anybody has any questions about what we're doing, we'd be more than happy to share those things with you. Who are the fiber providers that we work with that are very attuned to some of the challenges that we have in rural areas, right down to what do we use as far as like equipment for a lot of our radios, for air fiber, how has been our success with Starlink and communications at the equipment level and at the field level, and and stuff that we do with American Tower and so on and so forth. Anybody has any questions about any of those things, please feel free to reach out.
I think it just goes to show that it's always farmers are figuring it out. I think in one of our last cohorts, the community held a session with their young farmers and how they piecemealed together their connections and how they operated in consideration of their either high quality broadband or lack of broadband. And people are making it work, but a lot of times there's a lot of workarounds to make it work for them. And I think as we know these farmers, when there's good connectivity, they're going to start making great use of it. And as they see either opportunities, we'll call it, from John Deere or the other equipment manufacturers to step up and do things that require higher connectivity, they're finding ways to make it happen. Benton has a nice study, Future of Farming, that really talks about that connection to the farmhouse, connection to the barn, and then connections out into the fields, and really goes through a lot of those scenarios that you were talking about, Scott, that which technology is the right technology for which application is always going to be a question. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Starlink,
Absolutely.
yeah, and certainly Starlink is a great a game changer for broadband in the field. There's no doubt about that, and even to the house um, for folks who want to make use of that and having that high quality connection anywhere, anytime. And it's an interesting thing, you know. Certainly, larger farmers, a Starlink connection is not a huge financial barrier. It can be pretty expensive for the average homeowner or so on. Scott, what's your take on will you see the other equipment companies jumping in with Starlink now, the other brands, the red ones and red tractors, or are they going to go their own way, a different way?
Well, with the amount of data that we're collecting at the implement level, there has been, you know, at various times, and this is one, you know, this is a lot of the data that we collect in season. So if we go out and we use John Deere equipment to do custom apps, we capture that data. So we're capturing any as applied data. The grower is actually bringing in his planting data. The grower is actually bringing in any application data that he does. He has his harvest data from the combine. Anything that he is actually, you know, doing with any kind of Deere equipment, or, you know, it could be a CNH Industrial, it could be any one of these. We run into the same thing. There's data that that they've been collecting. One of the things that has been kind of like you know, a barrier in that last mile has been, you know, they're collecting this and now they got to go back and they got to offload it. You know, they take it off on a SD card, or they hook it up, you know, their monitors and everything up to internet at some point to get it so that it can actually flow into the system. That really doesn't, that's not conducive to what really needs to happen. What really needs to happen are these things coming into the systems on the back end in real time. And in order to facilitate that, you need to have something like Starlink. You have to have that connectivity to the farmer through some sort of you know, high-speed communications, and Starlink is a really good example of that. So will all the others follow suit? Absolutely, because there's the high demand for real-time data, and, you know, not only data that's actually being collected through the equipment, but also, you know, telemetry data and things like that that can go back to you know, to your Deere dealer or to Deere itself. You know, these things need, you know, they need to be in real time, and there needs to be a better way than what they've used in the past as far as like cellular and things like that. It's you know, it's worked. It was a good stepping stone, but now Starlink is available. I see more and more people, as far as manufacturers go, leaning on that and utilizing and incorporating those things into into their actual infrastructure. So yes, I do see every manufacturer using some sort of satellite communications to equipment.
Good. Scott, I want to thank you so much for jumping in today. I know there was some confusion and I apologize for being my part on that.
It's not a problem. And honestly, it was like, she's like, I've got this other meeting I've got to go. We've got to leave to, and I forgot all about this. So it's like, you know, I'm like, great, I don't have a presentation put together or anything, but, you know, I've done this before, you know, with this group, and I got a pretty good idea of what we need to talk about and what they're wanting to learn. So
Good.
It's
I appreciate
not a problem. Not a problem.
Do you mind
Hey,
if I
Scott,
share your
we-
email with the
Yeah.
with the group?
No, feel free. Anybody wants to reach out to me about anything, please do so. And you know, if I can't answer the question, you know, our internal IT can answer some of the questions as well.
Good. Well, thanks again for joining us, and have a great day.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Well, we sure got our education around agriculture and technology today, and I think really interesting to see the market trends and what's happening there. And you have to think about, what does that really mean for your communities? And as we see this need for, and as this study from Benton shows about the future of agriculture, that connection to the house, that connection to the barn, and then the connection to the equipment in the fields, all very different. It's a combination of technologies, and those with the best connectivity in all parts of that piece and mobile are going to be able to use the technology to its fullest, as opposed to trying to piece things together. I know we've had many farmers participating in this, where the idea of taking the flash drive and getting in the truck and driving 20 miles to hand over data is not unusual. So it's but that's certainly not the real-time kind of scenario that Scott talked about. Any questions or comments about the presentations today? I want to thank Bailey for joining us and for the work you're doing. I think in your county, I think is great. It's really a model, and we know that it's hilarious. I won't say hilarious, but quite the process to get that right agreement created and then get people to sign it. I know that's a big task in rural counties. So if you're not thinking about that for your county, how do we lower the barriers to broadband deployment? You really need to get on that. So Kathy's asking about surveys. I know the surveys are closed. I don't know if Mike has any update. I know Nancy was not available today to be with us, so I'm sure she's cranking away on that. Mike, do you have anything to share on that?
No updates.
Okay, so we'll definitely send an update by email, and expect those. Usually it's a 7 to 10 day kind of turnaround of, I think Nancy spends at least a day per community on these reports and making sure the data is in there correctly and testing that. But expect those results on schedule prior to our planning sessions that are happening soon. Reed, what's our status of communities that have signed up? Are we full?
Yeah, I think not quite everyone has signed up. I think maybe 3 or 4 of the 6 have signed up for at least one meeting.
Yeah.
So the team leaders should have all gotten a link to a Google Calendar sign up, where you can sign up for a 2-hour time slot between April 1st and 17th. And each team has the option to sign up for 2 of those slots, kind of ideally one near the beginning towards the first and one near the end, to where we can meet with you all for 2 hours and or up to 2 hours and assist whatever planning hurdles or kind of get some organization help to you all.
Good, thanks, Reed. And so maybe your groups can talk about the best dates and get online on that Google Calendar and get that filled out. Great to get those on the calendar in advance. And again, many times we're seeing that communities use that first 2-hour session as, let's talk about our plan. And then the second one, which doesn't usually last as long, is a quick review of your plan with me and Reed. And then we kind of do some critique and offer any kind of input as we go. So hopefully things are in your counties are becoming clear. If they're not, if you're struggling to think, we've gathered all this information and now what are we going to do about it? Feel free to reach out to me and or to Reed to get some of our help up front, if there's a big hurdle you're trying to get over or just trying to sort through your options. Hopefully your provider interviews are going well. If people want to talk about that, if anyone wants to share anything they've learned in a broadband provider interview, and share a success or a frustration, we could hear that now, or you can just hop into your rooms now for your planning sessions. Good. So then we'll ask Reed to open up the breakout rooms, and stay in there as long as you need to share your information and plan your work and review your findings, and let us know how we can help.
And one last note on that, the scheduling those meetings, if the time frame isn't working, I think they're in 2-hour increments, and it might only let you schedule on, you know, from a certain, you know, 9:30 to 11:30. You know, if something doesn't work out, just reach out, or if we need to go a little later, I'm sure we can be flexible. Opening the rooms now.
Good, thanks.